Morning, everybody. Kind of cold here this morning, so I'm all bundled up. And been trying to read through my book, and I still get distracted too much. So I thought, well, I'll just record it, and if anybody wants to hear this after I tell you what it's about, then that would be great. But every once in a while, I'll pick up a book, just any book, next to the bed, and I'll open it to a page and I'll read what it says, see if it says something to me before I go to bed. And the other night, I picked up the Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose book. And I opened it, and this is the paragraph I read. Here is one of the most common negative states that is easily overlooked, precisely because it is so common, so normal. You may be familiar with it. Do you often experience a feeling of discontent that could best be described as a kind of background resentment? And was like, oh, yeah. I try to be a person that is aware of how I feel and why I feel it, and like what in my past caused me to feel this way. Is it a self-defense mechanism? I've gone very deeply into like self-help books to the point where I think it's been detrimental to productivity and meeting people and trust and my worldview. Um, so when I read that about a background resentment going on and a discontent, I am so discontent. And I know people may look at my Facebook and some of the little things I do, and part of it's me not following my passions, but at the same time, I haven't ever found a focus or direction. And so there's lots of things going on with that, but background resentment is a huge one. And so it said it may be either specific or non-specific. Mine's non-specific. There's nothing I can always put my finger on to say this is why I feel this way. It's just an overall sense of hopelessness in a lot of things, and that things will never work out. And it says that they are so identified with it that they cannot stand back and see it. Underlying that feeling are certain unconsciously held beliefs, that is to say, thoughts. You think these thoughts in the same way that you dream your dreams when you are asleep. In other words, you don't know you are thinking those thoughts, just as the dreamer doesn't know he is dreaming. And I'm like, yeah. And it just really, really made me think. And I don't remember reading this in this book, and I've read this whole thing. So it made me go back and read these couple of pages. So I thought, if that sounds like something, that background unhappiness that a lot of people feel, that maybe these couple of pages would help. I'm going to read through them. It's going to be a little while. It's about 10 to 11 pages. And it starts with recognizing your child. And I thought that was a really interesting way to do this, because there's a separateness that we all have between us and them. I mean, we see it in politics. We see it in the world. I know at my job, there's just a separateness between us and them always. And so this recognizing your child was pretty good. So I thought I would start there, read through a couple of pages real quick. So recognizing your child. You are a human being. What does that mean? Mastery of life is not a question of control, but of finding a balance between human and being. Mother, father, husband, wife, young, old. The roles you play, the functions you fulfill, whatever you do, all that belongs to the human dimension. It has its place and needs to be honored, but in itself it is not enough for a fulfilled, truly meaningful relationship or life. Human alone is never enough, no matter how hard you try or what you achieve. Then there is being. It is found in the still, alert presence of consciousness itself, the consciousness that you are. Human is form, being is formless. Human and being are not separate but interwoven. And It's actually one of those paragraphs I have to comment real quick that hits me really hard. Because, I've never looked at that as separate things, really, human being. But yeah, I mean, because I think everybody's in a place through COVID and everything that life just, we may have a good job, we may be making decent money, things are fairly good in our lives, but there's still this sense of what's it matter, what's the being part. Like, I'm not living life. Yes, I'm content, but unhappy. And I think there's just so many people right now that live that way. And that's part of what we're seeing in the world, I think, is that disconnect, but there's no balance of life. Like, we get like 10 days of vacation time a year, and I'm just like, it's not enough. I don't even use them to go visit friends anymore. I don't get out in the world and connect anymore. I've lost trust in a lot of things, and so I just shut down. I work on myself, went through the self-help journey. Like I said, I think it got to be detrimental when I think a lot of us do need connection. But it needs to be connections that fulfill us. We do need to be recharged by them. Just to hang out's not the answer. Just to go do something that may not recharge us is not always the answer. But I have lost touch of that social connection and traveling and things like that. So that's a part of it. So just reading that right there is already huge for me. That there's two parts. There's the human part, the everyday, the roles we play, and there's the being part, and these are interwoven. So in the human dimension, you are unquestionably superior to your child. You are bigger, stronger, know more, can do more. If that dimension is all you know, you will feel superior to your child, if only unconsciously. And you will make your child feel inferior, if only unconsciously. There is no equality between you and your child because there is only form in your relationship, and in the form, you are, of course, not equal. You may love your child, but your love will be human only, that is to say, conditional, possessive, intermittent. Only beyond form in being are you equal, and only when you find the formless dimension in yourself can there be true love in that relationship. The presence that you are, the timeless I am, recognizes itself in another. And the other, the child in this case, feels loved, that is to say, recognized. To love is to recognize yourself in another. The other's otherness then stands revealed as an illusion pertaining to the purely human realm, the realm of form. The longing for love that is in every child is that longing to be recognized, not on the level of form, but on the level of being. If parents honor only the human dimension of the child but neglect being, the child will sense that the relationship is unfulfilled, that something absolutely vital is missing, and there will be a buildup of pain in that child and sometimes unconscious resentment towards the parents. Why don't you recognize me? This is what the pain or resentment seems to be saying. When when another recognizes you, that recognition draws the dimension of being more fully into this world through both of you. That is that love that redeems the world. I have been speaking of this with specific reference to the relationship with your child, but it equally applies, of course, to all relationships. It has been said God is love, but that is not absolutely correct. God is the one life in and beyond the countless forms of life. Love implies duality, lover and beloved, subject and object. So love is the recognition of oneness in the world of duality. This is the birth of God into the world of form. Love makes the world less worldly, less dense, more transparent to the divine dimension, the light of consciousness itself. To me, even reading that is just, it's so well put, because you look at it as, you see somebody on the street, there's a separateness there. You deal with your children, there's a separateness there. I'm over you, I'm telling you what to do. But there's also a being. We're on the same level if we look at it as we're both beings. And to me, that's just an amazing recognition to get past the form and more on a, I would say, spiritual or energy level, that we are the same. So if you can deal with your relationships and your children and things like that on that level, and they will feel recognized, I'm like, that's a pretty amazing way to look at that. Next one says giving up role playing. To do whatever is required of you in any situation without it becoming a role that you identify with is an essential lesson in the art of living that each one of us here is here to learn. You become most powerful in whatever you do if the action is performed for its own sake rather than as a means to protect, enhance, or conform to your role identity. Every role is a fictitious sense of self, and through it, everything becomes personalized and thus corrupted and distorted by the mind, the mind-made little me, and whatever role it happens to be playing. Most of the people who are in positions of power in this world, such as politicians, TV personalities, business, as well as religious leaders, are completely identified with their role, with a few notable exceptions. They may be considered VIPs, but they are no more than unconscious players in the egoic game, a game that looks so important yet is ultimately devoid of true purpose. It is, in the words of Shakespeare, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Amazingly, Shakespeare arrived at this conclusion without having the benefit of television. If the egoic earth drama has any purpose at all, it is an indirect one. It creates more and more suffering on the planet, and suffering, although largely ego created, is in the end also ego destructive. It is the fire in which the ego burns itself up. In a world of role-playing personalities, those few people who don't project a mind-made image, and there are some even on TV, in the media, in the business world, but function from a deeper core of their being, those who do not attempt to appear more than they are, but are simply themselves, stand out as remarkable, and are the only ones who truly make a difference in this world. They are the bringers of the new consciousness. Whatever they do becomes empowered because it is in alignment with the purpose of the whole. Their influence, however, goes far beyond what they do, far beyond their function. Their mere presence, simple, natural, unassuming, has a transformational effect on whoever they come into contact with. When you don't play roles, it means there is no self, ego, in what you do. There is no secondary agenda, protection, or strengthening of yourself. As a result, your actions have far greater power. You are totally focused on the situation. You become one with it. You don't try to be anybody in particular. You are most powerful, most effective when you are completely yourself, but don't try to be yourself. That's another role. It's called natural, spontaneous me. As soon as they are trying to be this or that, you are playing a role. Just be yourself is good advice, but it can also be misleading. The mind will come in and say, let's see, how can I be myself? Then the mind will develop some kind of strategy. How to be myself, another role. How can I be myself? Is in fact the wrong question. It implies that you have to do something to be yourself. But how doesn't apply here, because you are yourself already. Just stop adding unnecessary baggage to who you already are. But I don't know who I am. I don't know what it means to be myself. If you can be absolutely comfortable with not knowing who you are, then what's left is who you are. The being behind a human, a field of pure potential rather than something that is already defined. Give up defining yourself, to yourself or to others. You won't die. You will come to life. And don't be concerned with how others define you. When they define you, they are limiting themselves, so it's their problem. Whenever you interact with people, don't be there primarily as a function or a role, but as a field of conscious presence. Why does the ego play roles? Because of one unexamined assumption, one fundamental error, one unconscious thought. That thought is, I am not enough. Other unconscious thoughts follow. I need to play a role in order to get what I need to be fully myself. I need to get more so that I can be more. But you cannot be more than you are, because underneath your physical and psychological form, you are one life. You are one with life itself, one with being. In form, you are and will always be inferior to some, superior to others. In essence, you are neither inferior nor superior to anyone. True self-esteem and true humility arise out of that realization. In the eyes of the ego, self-esteem and humility are contradictory. In truth, they are one and the same. That's a good one too. It kind of falls into my whole thing about worrying what other people think. Way, way too much. I'm always trying to question how to be myself. I mean, I feel like in every situation, I've said before that I'm a chameleon to people. I don't like rocking the boat. I don't like to make waves. So I pretty much can fit in any situation. I enjoy meeting people. I can go to a party and I can do okay and blend in and talk about things. Now those things may not recharge me if it's something that I am doing out of a role playing. So that's very interesting one to me. That, you already who you are, the being behind the human field and pure potential rather than something that is already defined. That's another thing in the world. We define everybody. We define ourselves. We define so many things. And you do that, you put yourself in a box. I mean, that's for sure. Why do we do that? Why are we so hung up on all that stuff? And another thing that this strikes me is when it talks about ego. I guess I've always thought I try to be a humble person. I feel like I got some of that from my mom. She does so much for everybody. And then at the same time, I feel like, okay, I'm humble. I try to be humble. Try not to promote myself above others. But then I'll let myself get walked over. And you think that's a form of humility. And so you go, oh, well, I can't. My point is, so I guess I think that, well, I don't really have that much of an ego. But actually, ego's at play behind a lot of my thinking. And if I don't look at it and recognize it, which is what the upcoming paragraphs are going to say, then I'll continue to just go through the same motions every day. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, well, I'm a humble person. I don't make waves. I don't want to cause problems. I've let myself be walked over forever. Well, that comment right there is already ego. I've let myself be walked on forever, so I'm a victim. And I've let a victim mentality distort a lot of my thinking. So it's just something I have to recognize and I have to look at, because I've said that before. There's a lot of people that were victimized, but if you step back and look at it as a bigger perspective, it's like we're actually doing really well. It's our own mental state. It's our own perception of our situation that is making us a victim, and then that's distorting our attitude, how we treat people, the conversations we have, and then that just feeds into that whole loop of, well, now I'll never get out of here. My life will never change. I'll never meet somebody. Everybody's out to get me. There's always an agenda. There's always, so much pressure on expectations of what I'm supposed to be. And so this is stuff that I really need to think about, because I've let a lot of things close the world out to me. Just protect myself, just sit here and do my thing. But at the same time, I haven't felt that sense of that line of purpose. Like, what is it I'm aiming for? What's the purpose of getting up Monday morning to go to work? What is it? Why do any of it? So I haven't had a sense of direction, and a lot of it's because I'm lost with a lot of this stuff. So let's look at the next one. The next one says, the pathological ego. In a wider sense of the word, the ego itself is pathological, no matter what form it takes. When we look at the ancient Greek root word of the word pathological, we discover just how appropriate that term is when applied to the ego. Although the word is normally used to describe a condition of disease, it is derived from pathos, which means suffering. This is, of course, exactly what the Buddha already discovered 2,600 years ago as a characteristic of the human condition. A person in the grip of ego, however, does not recognize suffering as suffering, but will look upon it as the only appropriate response in any given situation. The ego in its blindness, is incapable of seeing the suffering it inflicts on itself and on others. Unhappiness is an ego-created mental emotional disease that has reached epidemic proportions. It is the inner equivalent of the environmental pollution of our planet. Negative states such as anger, anxiety, hatred, resentment, discontent, envy, jealousy, and so on are not recognized as negative, but as totally justified, and are further misperceived not as self-created, but as caused by someone else or some external factor. I am holding you responsible for my pain. That is what, by implication, the ego is saying. The ego cannot distinguish between a situation and its interpretation of and reaction to that situation. You might say, "What a dreadful day," without realizing that the cold, the wind, and the rain, or whatever condition you react to, are not dreadful. They are as they are. What is dreadful is your reaction, your inner resistance to it, and the emotion that is created by that resistance. In Shakespeare's words, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That's true. In a lot of ways. I know people argue that point. And that's I'm around a lot of those people. Some people are my friends, but what about this and what about that? But what is what is. So what is more, suffering or negativity is often misperceived by the ego as pleasure, because up to a point the ego strengthens itself through it. So that's interesting. What is more, suffering or negativity is often misperceived by the ego as pleasure, because up to a point the ego strengthens itself through it. For example, anger or resentment strengthen the ego enormously by increasing the sense of separateness, emphasizing the otherness of others, and creating a seemingly unassailable fortress-like mental position of rightness. If you are able to observe the psychological changes that take place inside, the physiological, changes that take place inside your body when possessed by such negative states, how they adversely affect the functioning of your heart, the digestive and the immune system, and countless other bodily functions, it would become abundantly clear that such states are indeed pathological, are forms of suffering and not pleasure. And this is something I went to the doctor. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my legs and feet. This is something else that has brought me back to reading these books. And basically, there is some type of autoimmune inflammatory thing going on with me. And he said I could go see what kind of autoimmune disease it is. And then, of course, you look it up and it's like, increased cortisol levels make this worse, make inflammation worse. And I have constantly lived in a negative state of mind for a long, long time, knowing that it's chemically making things in my body that are probably killing me. And I've known that for a long, long time. But it hasn't made me change. How much of it is environmental, about the surroundings, your job, how you feel about things. It's that everyday routine that your brain goes through. Mine is always gearing towards be ready for catastrophe. Prepare yourself for the horrible things. And that's just where my mind has lived for many, many years now since I've been home. So I know I'm producing these chemicals in my body that are not good. They're not good. So that's another reason I've been trying to read more, get off social media more, and breathe and try to tell my body that it's okay. I'm not in distress. Everything's okay right now. Calm down. Stop producing all this stuff. So anyway, that's interesting too. And that's another way for me to look at changing my attitude is for the betterment of not just the people around me, but my own health. It's something I truly believe you can change, and produce better chemicals in your body and all that kind of thing. So anyway, whenever you are in a negative state, there is something in you that wants the negativity, that perceives it as pleasurable, or that believes it will get you what you want. That's a big statement too. Otherwise, who would want to hang out to negativity, make themselves and others miserable, and create disease in the body? So whenever there's negativity in you, if you can be aware at that moment that there is something in you that takes pleasure in it or believes it has a useful purpose, you're becoming aware of the ego directly. The moment this happens, your identity has shifted from ego to awareness. This means the ego is shrinking and awareness is growing. That's a huge statement. Huge statement. If in the midst of negativity you are able to realize, at this moment I am creating suffering for myself, it will be enough to raise you above the limitation of conditioned egoic states and reactions. It will open up infinite possibilities which come to you when there is awareness. Other vastly more intelligent ways of dealing with any situation. You will be free to let go of your unhappiness the moment you recognize that it is unintelligent. Negativity is not intelligent. It is always of the ego. The ego may be clever, but it is not intelligent. Cleverness is pursuing its own little aims. Intelligence sees the larger whole in which all things are connected. Cleverness is motivated by self-interest, and it is extremely short-sighted. Most politicians and business people are clever. Very few are intelligent. Whatever is attained through cleverness is short-lived and always turns out to be eventually self-defeating. Cleverness divides and intelligence includes. If there was a line the world needed to hear right now, man, there's so much to be unpacked in that. I mean, because I'm around people, like I said, some people that are friends of mine. We're all sort of in the same state. We all feed off each other, like this victim mentality. This we never gonna get ours, and people getting free handouts, and all this stuff. But there's, like I said, that's interesting that it talks about cleverness. Because everybody always thinks they're too smart. Like, let me tell you what's wrong with this situation. Let me tell you what I would do if I was in it. Not to say there aren't better answers for some questions and better ways to do things. But we can get so caught up in that. Being clever. Like, well, I'm smarter than half the people here, and I'm going to do this, this, this. Well, a lot of that's ego. That's something I'm starting to see. It's like we all think we got the answers. So I thought that was great. Once you realize that suffering, that I'm creating the suffering for myself with the way I'm letting my mind roam free and continue to think negative thoughts. So being self-aware of those thoughts is a way to get out of it. So once you're aware and recognize, okay, not today. It's hard to do. I try to do it every day. I've stopped myself literally hundreds of times thinking negative thoughts. I have conversations in my head. I have dialogue preparing myself for an argument. Or what if this happens? And I'm sure that goes back to my past and like somebody hurt me somewhere down the line. And now I have to prepare myself for, this confrontation that's going to come up. And so I'll have these conversations in my head all day long. So anyway, let's get to this next one. The background unhappiness. The ego creates separation, and separation creates suffering. The ego is therefore clearly pathological. Apart from the obvious ones such as anger, hatred, and so on, there are other more subtle forms of negativity that are so common that are usually not recognized as such. For example, impatience, irritation, nervousness, and being fed up. They constitute the background unhappiness that so many people's predominant inner state. You need to be extremely alert and absolutely present to be able to detect them. Whenever you do, it is the moment of awakening, of disidentification from the mind. Here is one of the most common negative states that is easily overlooked, precisely because it is so common, so normal. You may be familiar with it. Do you often experience a feeling of discontent that could best be described as a kind of background resentment? It may be either specific or non-specific. Many people spend a large part of their lives in that state. They are so identified with it that they cannot stand back and see it. Underlying that feeling are certain unconsciously held beliefs, that is to say, thoughts. You think these thoughts in the same way that you dream your dreams when you are asleep. In other words, you don't know you are thinking those thoughts, just as the dreamer doesn't know he is dreaming. And that's where I've been for a long time. A lot of the thoughts I don't even know I'm having, I'm just in the background. Here are some of the most common unconscious thoughts that feed that feeling of discontent or background resentment. I have stripped away the content from those thoughts so that the bare structure remains. They become more clearly visible that way. Whenever there is unhappiness in the background of your life, or even in the foreground, you can see which of these thoughts applies and fill in your own content according to your personal situation. So here's one. There is something that needs to happen in my life before I can be at peace, happy, fulfilled. and I resent that it hasn't happened yet. Maybe my resentment will finally make it happen. That's probably a me a lot. Something happened in the past that should not have happened, and I resent that. And if that hadn't happened, I would be at peace now. Yep. Been hurt by people, had people who were special to me, hurt me and let me down. And then I think if those things hadn't happened, maybe things would be different. I don't think about them very often, but it's definitely added to my sense of resentment and discontentment. Here's another one. Something is happening now that should not be happening, and it is preventing me from being at peace now. So often the unconscious beliefs are directed towards a person, and so happening becomes doing. You should do this or that so that I can be at peace. And I resent that you haven't done it yet. Maybe my resentment will make you do it. There's another one. Something you or I did, said, or failed to do in the past is preventing me from being at peace now. What you are doing or failing to do is preventing me from being at peace now. So that's a lot of excuses that we tell ourselves of why we're not at peace. Very true. So here's one, because the secret of happiness. All of the above are assumptions, unexamined thoughts that are confused with reality. They are stories the ego creates to convince you that you cannot be at peace now and cannot be fully yourself now. Being at peace and being who you are, that is being yourself, are one. I'll read that again. Being at peace and being who you are, that is being yourself, are one. The ego says maybe at some point in the future I can be at peace if this, that, or the other happens, or I obtain this or that or become that. Or it says I can never be at peace because of something that happened to me in the past. Listen to people's stories and they could all be entitled, Why I Cannot Be at Peace Now. The ego doesn't know that your only opportunity for being at peace is now. Or maybe it does not. Maybe it does know, and it is afraid that you may find this out. Peace, after all, is the end of the ego. How to be at peace now? By making peace with the present moment. The present moment is the field on which the game of life happens. It cannot happen anywhere else. Once you have made peace with the present moment, see what happens. What you can do or choose to do, or rather what life does through you. There are 3 words that convey the secret of the art of living, the secret of all success and happiness. One with life. Being one with life is being one with now. You then realize that you don't live your life, but life lives you. Life is the dancer and you are the dance. The ego loves its resentment of reality. What is reality? Whatever is. Buddha called it tathata, the suchness of life, which is no more than the suchness of the moment. Opposition towards that suchness is one of the main features of the ego. It creates the negativity that the ego thrives on, the unhappiness that it loves. In this way, you make yourself and others suffer and don't even know that you are doing it. Don't know that you are creating hell on earth. To create suffering without recognizing it. This is the essence of unconscious living. This is being totally in the grip of ego. To create hell on earth. That's a pretty good statement. To be gripped in ego. I think we can see a lot of that in the world. The extent of the ego's inability to recognize itself and see what it is doing is staggering and unbelievable. It will do exactly what it condemns others for not seeing, for and not see it. That's hilarious to me, because I think we do know people like that. So the extent of the ego's inability to recognize itself and see what it is doing is staggering and unbelievable. It will do exactly what it condemns others for and not see it. that we all know people that are like, how do I put this? I can't believe those slackers over there and how they act and how they're, that person that's always pointing the fingers at everybody else while standing and doing nothing for 30 minutes talking about those people. Like, so that interesting that could just be, like you said, ego, like it's describing here, and its inability to recognize itself. And what you're creating is a hell on earth. You're creating your own worst day by standing there and pointing fingers to everyone else. That is what it is. And if you can't control it, I'm ruining my day. I've done it plenty. Ruining my day, my emotions, and they have no clue that I'm upset. They have no clue. So here's one of these moments where I've let my life a lot feel like I've been walked over. Well, I can look at a lot of those things and say, did I speak up to myself for myself? No. Did I make my voice heard that I didn't agree with something? No. I just sat back thinking, I'm not going to cause waves. I'm not. So that could be just a self love issue. Do I care about myself enough to say things when they need to be said? And we get very resentful of people who the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I mean, I get so upset with that because I'm like, the people that ask for raises get raises. The people that think they just deserve, like they'll see my work ethic and I'll get something for that. Doesn't often happen. So there's a lot of things I could have done different to stand up for myself and say what's on my mind. And it's way better to say that than just become resentful and shut down. And then especially to redirect it towards anger towards other people who may get it. I sit back all the time and think, well, I can't be mad at a person who took the initiative to ask for a raise, or I just one example, but lots of different things. I'm like, it's just the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I say that all the time. And it is one of those things that makes me so upset at the world. The people that are loudest get the most attention. So it's something I still got to work on, but I do think a lot of it is self-love issue of like, where do I rate myself? Am I going to speak up? I have learned to say no more to people. I have learned to protect my energy a bit more. And then what do I want from social engagements and different things like that? I really want to get more creative at home. I mean, I've got lots to do, and that might be even connecting with other people that do similar things. You know, that's something I haven't truly found. So maybe in search of that social part of myself, but I've let so many things just dictate to me that like, nope, forget everybody else. I'm going to just sit here. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to inspire. I'm going to be my own source of inspiration. It doesn't really work that way for me. But like I said, all this is something I'm working on. So anyway, let's keep going. So the inability to recognize itself is staggering and unbelievable. It will do exactly what it condemns others for and not see it. When it is pointed out, it will use angry denial, clever arguments, and self-justifications to distort the facts. People do it, corporations do it, governments do it. When all else fails, the ego will resort to shouting or even to physical violence. Send in the Marines. We can now understand the deep wisdom in Jesus' words on the cross, forgive them for they know not what they do. True. I always try to look at when people are a certain state or angry or anything else, I always try to look past what they're saying. And I do try to look back and say, there's probably things in their past that make them that way. Just like me. There are things that have happened to them that put them in this, that gives them this perception. And so I think that's a big thing with the world and politics and people that speak to each other. If you can't understand their perspective, then you can't have a conversation. There's something that has caused them to be that way. And if you don't understand that and have some kind of compassion or empathy for their history, and you take their argument at face value always, and what they're angry about or what's going on in their life just at face value, you can prejudge someone and you put them in a little box and you're like, I'm going to dismiss your existence and I'm going to put you to the side. And we do that far too often. We have to be able to understand that the core of what people need in their lives is the same. Maybe some didn't get it. Maybe that's caused this. So at the end of the day, again, to be loving and compassionate towards others, it's very hard to do sometimes. But I do think that's something that the world overlooks. It's like you're not seeing the oneness and where we all come from and what we all need. The beingness of what people are. We look at the form, external form, and circumstance. Okay, so the next one, I think there's just a little bit left. To end the misery that has afflicted the human condition for thousands of years, you have to start with yourself and take responsibility for your inner state. And at any given moment, that means now ask yourself, is there negativity in me at this moment? Then become alert, attentive to your thoughts as well as your emotions. Watch out for the low-level unhappiness in whatever form that I mentioned earlier, such as discontent, nervousness, being fed up, and so on. Watch out for the thoughts that appear to justify or explain this unhappiness, but in reality cause it. The moment you become aware of a negative state within yourself, it does not mean you have failed. It means that you have succeeded. Until that awareness happens, there is identification with inner states, and such identification is ego. With awareness comes disidentification from thoughts, emotions, and reactions. This is not to be confused with denial. The thoughts, emotions, and reactions are recognized, and in the moment of recognizing, disidentification happens automatically. Your sense of self, of who you are, then undergoes a shift. Before, you are thoughts, emotions, and reactions. Now you are awareness, the conscious presence that witnesses those states. So this is, I think the Power of Now talked about this. When you're able to step back from that emotional trigger, and you can feel why it triggers it in you, you've now become self-aware. Maybe something happened to me in my past. Maybe this is, how many things do we link to text messages? Things like this all the time happen. If I ask someone something and I don't get a response, and for a long time, we can often take it as, that's the same hurt I felt from so-and-so, which escalates back to, that's the same pain I felt from a parent. So it's not just this moment of I don't feel recognized. It snowballs into every moment in my life that I have not felt recognized has culminated into this one friend not answering a text message. Or somebody not paying attention when I'm in an emotional state. It snowballs into every situation that's ever happened in. And so I'm carrying all that history into this one moment with one person and I'm done. You know, I'm like, done. And I've done that. I've shut down on people because I'm like, you know what? Why am I talking to people who don't want to talk back to me? At some point, you have to have enough self-love to say, okay, if this isn't good for me, I will step back from it. But at the same time, am I being too sensitive because of things that have happened to me in my past? Am I not allowing compassion for what's going on in their life? You know, what's going on? It's not all about me, you know. Like, why am I so important that I expect them to be on call every second because I need them right now, you know? So there's a lot going on there. I just find this stuff fascinating, and I'm always trying to figure out what else could I look at. And I don't know, just understanding in general. It helps me understand others, and how to better interact with people. So I don't know. If you're getting anything out of this and sticking around this long, congrats. um, but I like that because before you were thoughts, emotions, and reactions. And we live in a world of people just trigger reaction. Everything. Comedy, everything. Nobody could take a joke anymore. Nobody can do nothing. And I'm like, there's a certain level of like, how is that really affecting me? And why am I letting it upset me? I don't know. So, and now you are awareness and conscious presence, the witness that witnesses those states. So one day I will be free of the ego. Who is talking? The ego. To become free of the ego is not a really big job, but a very small one. All you need to do is be aware of your thoughts and emotions as they happen. This is not really a doing, but an alert seeing. In that sense, it is true that there is nothing you can do to become free of the ego. When that shift happens, which is the shift from thinking to awareness, an intelligence far greater than the ego's cleverness begins to operate in your life. Emotions and even thoughts become depersonalized through awareness. Their impersonal nature is recognized. There is no longer a self in them. They are just human emotions, human thoughts. Your entire personal history, which is ultimately no more than a story, a bundle of thoughts and emotions, becomes of secondary importance and no longer occupies the forefront of your consciousness. It no longer forms the basis for your sense of identity. You are the light of presence, the awareness that is prior to and deeper than any thoughts and emotions. That's a lot. That's all I was going to do for this. That's the Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth book. Highly suggested. Power of Now was good too, which I think was before this one. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack in those couple of pages. But I just thought I would share them. It's stuff that I know I need to work on. And it just boils down to being in the present moment. And I've even told friends and people, I'm not good at that. I've had really good days with friends, and I'm still either concerned about Monday morning, how the next week's going to be the same as it's always been. There's this unhappiness in the background, this foreshadowing of what's to come, and hopelessness in it that it's going to all be the same, that I don't have the power to change it. And so if we can, and I had a friend say something about the other day that they had this bitterness and angriness in them. And I did bring up the fact, I said, what if you just focused on the now, like right now? We're talking, we're friends. How does it feel if you're in the present moment? because that anxiety, that bitterness, that anger usually is from a past event or anxious about a future event. It's not always in the present moment. Because in the present moment, you can be more, do I need to make action? Let's do it. You know, I have creative things that I want to do. I did set up my printer the other day. I want to make some bookmarks, and just try the new AI stuff and use it as some reference for some things that I may want to do someday. And I need to do all that, but I sit in here and procrastinate because that's another thing. Procrastination is really fear, um, in a lot of situations. Procrastination can be a self-defense mechanism. So that's something else that I'm working on. But like to just be in the present moment, if we can just be in the present moment with the people we're with, I I think that's where it says where life happens and where life happens through you. And that's something that I really need to understand because I have this defined, everything has to be set up a certain way before happiness. Everything has to be controlled in a certain way, and someday life will happen. And all of that is self-protection, and I'm going to be in control. Well, obviously, I'm sitting here feeling like I've tried to control every aspect of my life, and I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So what happens if I breathe and enjoy the present moment, feel it for what it is, then maybe life would work through me. Maybe by happenstance, I run into somebody I didn't expect. Maybe you find love that you didn't expect, in all its forms. Instead of being like, nope, it has to be this way and it'll only happen on my timeline and when I want it to. That's keeping me very unhappy. And I think life is about living, and I think life is about experience. And if we've shut everything out because we have to be in control or we're protecting ourselves, there's no way for an outside experience to get in. So it's just something to think about. I just felt like I wanted to share that today. It's been almost an hour long. So if you stuck around this long, hopefully there was something in it that makes you rethink the day. And like I said, I think the biggest thing from that is just to be present. You hate to come down to something so simple because we're looking, let me read another book. That one didn't click with me. There's the answer got to be in one of these books somewhere. So let me just keep reading, keep searching. And then we get entrapped in that self-improvement, self-help trap of like, we'll just keep like reading and learning and watching new things on YouTube, and at some point it'll click. But it's like, I just need to be present with my thoughts, give myself a break, and loosen up a little bit. That High Ren song is amazing because he talks about the dance of life. If you haven't heard that song, go listen to that. It's called High Ren, Ren. And at the end, he talks about how he stared into a blank canvas and said, I'm going to defeat the forces of evil. And how that led to autoimmunity, disease, and just unhappiness. And he was trying to be so rigid in the dance of life. When he learned to relax and soften, the dance became easier. So again, this all kind of points to the same kind of egoic ways we go about life. And if we can learn to just relax, soften, enjoy the moment, be in the present moment, then you can make your energy can be more focused on what do I need to do now, today, instead of what happened in the past and what I'm worried about happening in the future, you know? And that's the thing I think a lot of us who get lost in this might, I know for myself, my energy is so spent in the day because of the internal dialogues and arguments and the victim mentalities. I have no energy left by the time I get home. None. Then I go into that. I've got to recuperate. My legs and feet hurt. I can't do anything. I'm going to sit and play video games. I'm going to sit and watch more YouTube content. And then you're getting in that cycle. And I think being in the present moment, if you're by yourself or you're with someone, to be with them, to be present, to see the beings behind the form of everything. I think there's something there. I think there's something there to learn from, and that we all may need to hear. But just relax and breathe, be in the present moment. If there's a decision need to be made, make it. If there's something you want to create it. Don't get we get so hung up on everything else that forms what we do. I'm working on it. I've got things I need to do today. Is it something I want to do? Then let's move in that direction. Be easy on ourselves. It doesn't have to all be done today. Make one little step. That's another thing. This grandiose vision of your future that we all might have. The online store I want to start. It's overwhelming. And then I go, it'll never happen. I can't do it. It's too big. One step at a time. I did set my printer up yesterday. Put new inks in it. Got a new printer. I downloaded my new version of, or I'm going to download the new version of Affinity Designer product stuff that I have on my new computer. And I got my sketchbook out. So it's like, do one little step at a time. I took pictures the other day as reference photos for my bookmarks that I want to make. I just need to open one up, do a quick sketch. It doesn't have to be a perfect sketch. I need to realize this can take a week if I want it to. This could take however long. But just enjoy the process of creating those things. So I don't know. Leave a comment if I post this online. I think a lot of people deal with this discontent, dissatisfied, and we can't really put our finger on it. Let's talk about it. Figure it out. Or there's nothing to figure out. Just be. Right? It's exhausting. And try to get out of that state of mind and be more at peace with ourselves. And that'd be nice. And with others. Anyway, if you stuck around this long, thanks. I will holler at you later. Hope everybody have a good day. Bye.